Good morning. This is the time and place for the Planning Hearing Officer's hearing for January 8th, 2014. Happy New Year, everyone. My name is Kristen Asp, and I will be conducting the hearings as hearing officer. We have one case today, and relevant exhibits are posted on the panels located directly behind me. Findings. As far as findings go, if the evidence presented in the application and at the hearing meets the criteria described in the findings for a case, the planning hearing officer can either approve or impose conditions for approval on the case in question. If the findings of fact are not evident, then the request will be denied. Public notice. Notification of this hearing was accomplished by use of public notices, which were mailed to property owners and occupants of property within 500 feet of the subject property, physically posted on the site in question, and placed in the local newspaper. The hearing will proceed as follows. The description of the application or request will be read. Reports and comments received from other city departments or other letters of communication from interested parties will be read if relevant. The case planner will make a brief overview of the case, give analysis, and make a recommendation. The applicant will be asked to come forward stating both name and address and will be asked to present the case within a 15-minute time limit. Others in the audience who wish to speak will be asked to come forward stating both name and address and will have a 3-minute time limit. The applicant will then be given the opportunity to make closing comments, if desired, in response to testimony given by preceding speakers within a 5-minute time limit. The hearing will be closed and the case taken under submission or a decision may be rendered. As far as the decision goes, after the hearing, the decision will be prepared in writing and will be in the form of a letter sent to the applicant and to all persons who responded to the public notice, either by speaking at this hearing or by submitting written responses and have provided their name and mailing address. The date of the decision will be the date appearing on the letter, not necessarily the date of this hearing. Appeals. Under the appeal provisions of Title 30, Chapter 30.62 of the Glendale Municipal Code, the decision may be appealed to the Planning Commission within 15 days of the decision date, and the notice of appeal shall be filed with the Building and Safety Division located in this building, MSB 101, across the hall. Speaker cards. If you wish to speak, please write your name and address on one of the speaker forms, which have been provided at the front door, and submit it to our planning staff. I would also like to inform everyone that the official proceedings of the Planning Hearing Officer's hearing are recorded on tape as part of the public record. Now, we'll move on to the agenda. The one and only item on the agenda is Conditional Use Permit Case PCUP 1323051. It's located at 611 North Brand Boulevard. The applicant is Ricarda Bennett, and the project description is an application for a conditional use permit to allow the continued use of a non-emergency heliport on the rooftop of an existing parking structure located at 611 North Brand Boulevard in the DSP GAT, which is the Downtown Specific Plan Gateway District Zone. I am going to now turn it over to the case planner, Mr. Duong, to give a brief overview of the project and any relevant information, please.
Thank you. Good morning, Hearing Officer Asp. As you stated, the subject site is located at 611 North Brand Boulevard. This site is within the DSP Gateway District and is developed with 3 buildings. There's a 14-story high-rise office building, a 1-story building south of it, and a 6-story parking structure. The heliport in question is located on the top level of the parking structure. The site is located between Sanchez and Doran, and it is immediately south of the 134 freeway. The heliport has been in operation since August 10th, 1982, that when it was originally approved with a CUP, and since then it has been renewed three times, in 1984, in 1992, and 2004. So this CUP will be the 4th renewal request for for the continued use of the heliport. This heliport is specifically used to transport document and personnel related to the transportation of those documents, and it's not intended for the general use. So in terms of the operation of the heliport, it will not be changed since it was originally approved. As you notice on the site plan drawing posted behind you, the route or path of travel will remain the same, which will be approached from the 134 freeway and depart towards the 134. So that will not create impacts to the nearby businesses or residents nearby. And that has always been the path of travel since this facility was established in 1982. Since within the 31 years in operations, there has been no complaints or violations of this from this facility, and in analyzing the request and making the findings, staff was able to make the appropriate findings in support of approval for the continued use of this heliport. The applicant will go into detail in terms of the findings, and with that, I conclude my presentations, and we recommend approval of the CUP with 10 conditions, some of which are standard condition and some which are relevant to this request.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duong. Just one quick question of a point of clarification. This is the use of this heliport is not for anybody in the public. It is only used for the businesses on site.
Correct.
Okay. And I will note that in the comments received from other divisions within the city, there were no comments given by any other department or division, consistent with what I believe you stated in your summary, that there have been no complaints or calls for service in that nature.
Right.
Okay.
And I would also like to add that staff did not receive any communication from the public about this case.
Okay. Thank you. So now I will go to our speaker cards, and I will call up Ricardo Bennett, please, to come forward and give us a little rundown on the application.
I'll present the evidence to support the findings.
Please.
Okay, this is by way of introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, rather, for a good presentation. Okay, as he stated, this is the renewal.
If I could have you state your name and address
Excuse
for the
me,
record,
you're
please.
correct. Yeah, it's Ricardo Bennett. My company's called Heliport Consultants. My address is 148 Gazania Court, Thousand Oaks, California.
Thank you.
Okay. As he stated, this is a renewal for a conditional use permit for a facility that's existed for about 31 years, excuse me. It was originally, by way of history, it was originally established for Security Pacific Bank, those many years ago, to use for float and for checks and for time-sensitive documents. But over the years, with the advent of the Internet, that was not necessary.
Okay.
And so, for the time-sensitive documents, so when the conditions were first established, it said only for float or only for time-sensitive documents. But in 2003, we changed that condition to allow for people as well as documents.
Okay.
Okay, and I think, I wanted to submit something to you. This was to make a change in the ownership. In the staff report, he reported L&R as the owner, and they are not the owner.
Okay.
Okay. So it's just a procedural thing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. First, we're going to talk about the land use around the helipad. In 2011 or 2012, it was changed from a central business district to the specific plan, the downtown specific plan, the gateway district.
Correct.
And so from a commercial financial type office buildings, now they're going to introduce mixed use. It could be hotels, motels, and apartment houses, and but it would still be high-rise commercial use buildings. So, with that in mind, to the north of the freeway, that's also called the downtown specific plan, and south across Doran, that's part of the specific plan, and there are multi-story buildings there. East is a 14-story multi-story building, which is the Glendale Central Bank of America Tower. It's occupied by Disney, YellowPages.com, and the Bank of America Annex, and also a women's gym, just to mention a few of the tenants. West along Central Avenue, now this is where there's been a change. It used to be a restaurant and a couple of multi-story buildings. And now there's going to be a 6-story apartment house, and it's referred to lately as the Nexus on Central apartment houses. And it will be right next to the parking structure. Across Central Avenue, there's 2 or 3-story buildings. And then there's the multi-story Unum building. It's quite a tall building. And that's also in the Gateway District. So this is all consistent in terms of zoning. Now I would like to present the evidence to establish the findings. Okay. And it will be preceded by each finding within the city of Glendale. There are 4 of them that one must establish evidence to support them. So I will read the first finding.
Okay.
How will the proposed use be consistent with the various elements and objectives of the general plan? And I would also like to add the specific plan, too, because that is like an overlay on top of the general plan.
Right.
And the elements of the general plan that will be emphasized will be like the noise element and the transportation element. Okay. First of all, in the specific plan, if one looks at it, they have taken into account that there can be a non-emergency helistop, and that's what this is, a non-emergency helistop, because it's a private use helistop, and is allowed because they've allowed that with a conditional use permit, and it's right there in the chart. Okay, so this helistop that we have established now will still be compatible with the various elements of the general plan and the specific plan that's called the downtown specific plan, because the conditions under which the helistop was first approved and will continue to be operated will continue to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community. The site's located in a commercial zone. It's right across from the freeway. It couldn't get much closer. And it's in the area where there are other commercial buildings. And it will continue to be used for commercial and mixed zone use in this special central district. When you read the special central district plan, the city is promoting corporate headquarters, new hotels, retail businesses, and also in the future they're talking about some kind of open space across the freeway. God bless. That could be used for intermodal transportation. They're talking about regional transportation center in that area. They're putting a cover on the freeway, possibly.
Exploring.
Excuse me?
Exploring that option.
Exploring that option. I think that was very creative. Very creative. Okay, so this... The heliport is part of an intermodal system, and it is part of an intermodal transportation system. It would be really very easy to integrate that. Regarding the noise element of the general plan, which talks about the noise exposure generated. We can talk about the noise exposure generated by the helicopter. And in the noise element of the general plan, there is a table called the Land Use Compatibility Chart. And that was not changed from before when the noise element was revised. And in that chart, which I have a copy of if you don't, I submitted it in my report, it talks about what land uses, and that's exactly it, what land uses are compatible in what areas, and it gives the city guidelines on how, what things they should approve, or how insulation or changes should be made to the building to make these land uses compatible. So in the land use compatibility chart, commercial buildings, churches, parks, office buildings are normally acceptable, and that's the highest level, if they're within the 70 dBA LDN or CNEL noise contour, CNEL community noise equivalent level, which is the state noise measurement. Okay, so that's 70 dBA. And this is sort of the criteria. I'm setting out the criteria for you.
Perfect.
In the residential, for multifamily dwellings, apartments, hotels, motels, it's normally compatible if they're located within a 65 dBA noise contour. Okay. And just as an aside, I did some noise measurements there near Sanchez and Central Avenue in July, just to see what the noise levels were generated. And they ran about 65 to 70, 77 LEQ, which is sort of more of an integrated noise measurement. It's the basis for CNEL, but it's not exactly CNEL.
Okay.
But it does fit in with the contours.
Okay.
Okay, so going back to the criteria. So I've set the criteria out. Now I'm talking about with the limited numbers of operations and the noise study that was done when the helipad was approved, which they used CNEL as a noise measurement. It noted that their noise contours of 65 were within the property, but they went a little over the property line. The 70 CNEL noise contours stayed right on the helipad. Okay, so in my supplemental application, I point out that this noise study that was done was projecting 15 landings a day, but the actual city council only approved 8 landings a day. Okay, so in that case, when you reduce the number of landings, you're also going to reduce the noise contour area, the noise exposure contour. So I concluded that, and then you reduce it by, when you half the number of landings, you reduce the exposure by 3 dB.
Okay.
So what happened is you reduce the noise contours. So the 70 is still going to become 67 CNEL noise contour, and that's certainly on the helipad. And the 65 becomes 62. And so that was reduced to stay on the property. And so it does not spill over into the area dealing like with where the apartments might be, for example. So,
and I think that's sort of the crux of the argument, if I may interject, that the change that I see as from the existing conditions from the original approval in 81 to today is that there is a new land use with residents.
That's correct.
That is immediately adjacent to
the property.
The property.
Right. But so we can see, though, that even if the 65 CNEL contour was there, it's still approvable because well, there's another thing that I didn't bring out yet. It's within the 70 CNEL noise contour from the freeway. So the noise exposure to the apartment exists from the freeway.
Correct.
And even if the freeway was not there, if they were in the 65 CNEL noise contour, that's still approvable because, according to your very own land use compatibility chart, if you have an apartment or a multi-use family structure within the 65 CNEL, that's normally acceptable, which is the highest level. But just going on, what the city did when they approved the EIR for the apartments, they realized it was within the 70 CNEL noise contour from the freeways, and so they asked for additional insulation in the buildings and double pane windows.
And I think you go into that at length in your supplemental summary.
Yes, I do talk about that there. And so that will attenuate the noise with the windows. And also, I will say they were very smart architecturally, the way they situated the building and the way the helipad is relative to the building. There are no windows that directly, from apartments, that are directly looking at that helipad. It's just a blank wall. You can see that somewhat in the picture over there, and I have other
Of the rendering, yeah.
other pictures. So it's just a blank wall that's showing, that's facing out on the parking structure.
Okay.
So I think that's really helps. Okay, that takes care of findings number one in terms of proving evidence of. It's consistent with the general plan, the specific plan, the noise element, and the transportation element. Okay, for number two, with the city's findings, criteria, the question is, why will the proposed use and its associated structures and facilities not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or general welfare, or to the environment? Well, it has existed since 1982, the helipad, with no noise or complaints or incidences. With regards to public health in terms of noise exposure, the helicopter pilots are taught to fly something called fly neighborly, which is a steeper approach.
Okay.
And that helps in reducing the approach and the departure, the noise exposure contours. And there's a figure 4, which you have on your wall.
Okay.
Very good. That shows that a steeper approach brings in the noise contour. And they are also instructed not to fly over noise-sensitive areas. And we make a little chart, it's like a little pilot information sheet, notice to pilots. So if they are coming in, I have an example here, and I can show it to you later.
Okay.
Which shows them the flight paths to use and the noise-sensitive areas and some criteria for the helipad.
Okay.
Excuse me. Another aspect, in addition to the steeper approach, is if you look at the flight paths. The flight paths are going directly to the north and over the freeway. So it's not flying over residential areas.
Okay.
Another thing is, and I think we discussed it in the first findings, is that there is already existing noise exposure from the freeways, and also we talked about the location of the apartments relative to the noise, so and to the helipad and to the operations. So we talked about that, and it's conditionally acceptable with the levels of the freeway that caused the city to say we need more insulation in those buildings. Okay. And also equally important is that when the city approved the apartments, they addressed the operations of the helipad at that time. They recognized it, and they concluded that the location of the residential units in the vicinity of the private use helistop would not result in a safety hazard for people residing or working in the project area. So they concluded that in their approval of the EIR for the apartment buildings. Okay, so in that conclusion, they said that the existing noise levels at this location would not be a problem either with regards to the helipad, because there's already the freeway there, too. And then the next issue is, in terms of public health, safety, and welfare, we are saying that it is also a public asset, because the helipad can be used at any time by the fire department or by the police department for emergency purposes.
Okay.
In an urban area, it's very difficult to, oh dear.
Keep going.
I won't. In an urban area, and this is becoming more condensed here in Glendale, it's very difficult for your air support. You have an air support division. Glendale has it, to find places to land, safe places to land. And this is a pre-made safe place to land. It's that you don't have to move stuff off of it. It's kept clean. It's kept available. And if they had to land there for any reason, they're able to do that. Okay, number 3 is, why will the proposed use and facility not adversely affect or conflict with the adjacent uses or impede the normal development of surrounding property? That is another criteria for the findings here in Glendale. Okay, the conclusion is that the property values, the existence of the helistop since 1982 has not affected the property values within the neighborhood. The zoning has been updated, and they've included the ability to put in mixed use. And the city knew about the helipad before, and they said, well, we can still do mixed use apartments and hotels. So it's a growing area. And there is a transit-oriented component, I said, possibly within this area. And so I think the helistop is consistent with the land uses within this area, too, geographical area. The city will continue to focus on implementing the specific plan and the Gateway District, and they will continue to promote it as a corporate headquarters area with high-rises and mixed-use buildings. And also additionally, you can't see the helipad from the street, so it's not at odds architecturally with the building. So it's not standing out there. Number 4 findings is that we're going to explain how adequate public and private facilities such as the utilities, the landscaping, the parking spaces, and traffic circulation measures are or will be provided for the proposed use. Well, it's been in existence for quite a while. The landscaping has been up there for a long time. And there are already adequate utilities, and the helipad is maintained to meet all the fire department requirements, and there are perimeter lights that are maintained, there's fire protection equipment, there's security cameras, there's motion alarm detectors, so that's all provided, and they're kept in tip-top condition. And so that concludes my summary of the findings to support the renewal of the CUP. And then I just have one thing that I would like to make a modification to the, it's a draft staff report.
Okay.
And I gave you a piece of paper with regards to that. Okay, so we already talked about the ownership, so that can be changed.
Okay.
And the other one has to do with correcting a couple of sentences one is in sentences in the analysis portion of the staff report,
Okay.
which talks about, it's paragraph 3, page 2. It talks about transporting only time-sensitive documents.
Okay.
So I'm suggesting that should be changed. And the same phraseology appears in paragraph C of the findings of the staff
Okay.
report.
Okay.
Okay, for reasons I have previously discussed.
Okay.
That the conditions are that you can now transport people as well as just
Okay.
documents and not necessarily time sensitive.
Okay.
Okay, so that concludes my
Summary of the findings.
Summary of findings.
I thank you.
And evidence. Is there any question?
I do have a few questions for you, and I
Yes.
think you went over my first one, which was to kind of walk through the supplemental application that you put together that really focused on the change in land uses of existing conditions surrounding the heliport. Mainly the apartments that are right next door. So
Yes.
and as they relate to our noise element. So I think you walk through that. That was my first question, and I guess just a few questions that came up as you were going through your findings. This now transports people and documents. So,
Okay.
can you give me an example of like the kind of people that are using it? I mean, is it the people who have access to it are the people in the Bank of America, YellowPages.com, those tenants in that building?
Yeah, it could.
Or just in generally
the-
speaking, who mainly uses it?
Yeah, it's for business purposes. So,
Okay.
so it could be that they would be transporting themselves or documents, say, to San Diego. So, I think I included another map. Yes, I see up there on the board where it shows where people could go. It's a short flights to like San Diego or to Irvine. Let's say you have an appointment in Irvine.
Okay.
Or you have an appointment in Santa Barbara.
Okay.
So it's not like, I don't think you would go to San Francisco in a helicopter.
Okay, and I guess
But-
maybe I'm just trying to get to who actually uses it. Is it just the people on that property, the businesses that are on that property, or is it available to transport other business folk to and from another meeting?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, in the sense that it's for people who are associated with that property in
Okay.
terms of
That's-
it's sort of business, but business related. In other words, it could be the way it usually works is that, let's say somebody's coming in from LAX, and so it could be a client of somebody who's there on the property, and so they
Okay.
would bring their client.
But somebody
in.
who's there on the property. It's
Right.
not necessarily I'm going to, use the Bank 123 that's across the street. Some executive from that company calls over and says, "Hey, I need to get to a meeting, down in Irvine. Can
I
you
don't-
give me a lift, or can I schedule a flight for that?" So
Well,
if it's a little more focused to the property, that's what I'm trying to get down.
Well, I don't know in
Okay.
terms of being specific.
Okay.
Because we're not asking for it. Let's say if we're not asking for another increase in number of operations.
Okay.
So there's no increase in the noise exposure.
Okay.
So it wouldn't impact environmentally
Okay.
what's going on.
And so then just to sort of on that train of thought,
Yeah.
it is limited to the
Yes.
8 trips a day. On average, do you know how many actually come in and out? I mean, just
Well, right now it's not being used very much.
Okay.
I think the heaviest use was during the bank days when they were floating checks and other documents.
okay. So I just even yes, there is a maximum of 8. It sounds like they're certainly not taking full advantage of those 8 trips every day.
That's correct.
And maybe
They
it's-
don't want them reduced.
Of course, but I mean, I understand that. I just am trying to get to how is it really kind of being used?
Well, right now, it's in limbo right now.
Okay.
Because the building's been foreclosed on, and so
Okay.
so they're in a holding pattern.
Okay, but
Speaking
this is part of
aviation-wise.
this is part of the package of that.
Right.
property.
It's also
Sure.
it's part of the assets
Okay.
of the building, just like having a sufficient parking. The ability to have a heliport or a helistop is very
Is an asset.
it is an asset to the
okay.
building because not a lot of buildings have those.
Okay.
In Glendale, you have the emergency helipads on top of the buildings.
Correct.
But those aren't for private use.
Correct.
You can't come in and out. This is something you could come in and out.
Okay. Okay.
And in the days when there was a lot of building going on, when McGuire owned the property, there were more operations.
Okay. Okay. So, and then on that, I know that from 1982, in the environmental that was done at the time, Some of the mitigation measures were limiting the type of helicopter, the actual,
Yes, we had
Bell
that changed
206L Long Ranger shall be permitted. I'm assuming that or a better equivalent that is less noise intensive or size-wise to be compatible with that, because that's that kind of language from 1982. I'm sure there are much newer models of helicopters that are smaller, more quiet, things of that nature to make that clear that a helicopter of that or equivalent would be acceptable.
Right. We had that condition also changed in 2003. There's a table 1, in my supplemental application that provides you with the comparison over the years of what has been changed.
Okay.
In the conditions.
Maybe in these draft conditions, that would supersede whatever other conditions you had from previous conditional use permits. That's not readily clear to me. So
right.
I guess I'm trying to get that clarified.
Right. So if you look at table 1, you will see that it gives a history, and the reason it's not clear is because sometimes part of the conditions are in your environmental approval.
Correct, but you can't change those.
And then later on, there's some conditions that are from the city council, I believe.
The mitigation measures for the environmental, those stay with the project consistently. The subsequent conditional use permits can tweak, independent conditions from this. So that's what this table sounds like.
Yeah. So we asked the city to change the fact that they could use different helicopters.
Sure. And that just
makes sense.
Just makes sense in terms of a flexibility standpoint.
Because the 206 is an older helicopter.
I'm sure it is at this point. Okay, those were some of my main questions. I have one more speaker card, and I'm seeing from the audience that they are waiving that, so I will not call on you again. I don't think staff has anything else to add? Or
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the questions that I have. At this point, I will take this case under submission, and this hearing is now officially closed. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much.